I want to take a moment and thank our sponsor, the Apple House. My husband and I just love doing business with them. They provide everything we need for summer, and summer is here. Plants, flowers, and any landscape needs that you may have. We've already been into the Apple House and purchased our pots for the porch. They have an amazing abundance. So be sure and go visit Tom and the crew there at Apple House and tell them Pinpoint sent you. Welcome to Pinpoint. Thank you for joining us today on this episode where I am just beyond thrilled to have our guest, Suzanne Jaworowski. Susie, as we like to call her because we're friends, is one of my newer friends, and I just love that you all are going to get an opportunity to get to know her and all of the things that she's accomplished in the state of Indiana and nationally and globally. And we're going to talk about a subject that is really intriguing to me, and just our natural resources, what God has given us and how we can be a steward of that, and how Susie has really just elevated in her career in a way that she may not have planned, but God had a plan and he's using her. So I want to just dive in and introduce you to my friend Susie. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Libby. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, good. Well, okay. I want to just ask you straight up. You are the Secretary of Energy and Natural Resources for the state of Indiana. I mean, this is a big deal. And, do you realize when you have that title, when you have this position, do you realize like this is like such a responsibility? And I just think this is an honor that I get to even visit with you about it. But what an honor, but what a responsibility that is.
Well, thank you so much, and I do realize the responsibility, and I will tell you that, uh, as you said in the introduction, my path was not at all what I could have ever dreamed up in my lifetime, and I know that God guided me along to different points in the way. And when Governor Mike Braun asked me to be the Secretary of Energy and Natural Resources, it wasn't at all in my plans. It had never even been a position before, but I felt that that would be a good fit for me based on where God had brought me to that point. And when I travel to work in the morning, I have a bit of a commute and I pray and I talk to God, and often I will pray just, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for this job. And please guide me in all that I think and say and do so that your will can be my will and
Mm.
that I can work in your behalf in this unique opportunity that I have. But I will tell you, when I was offered the position, I just really try to look at it as it's just a job. As awesome as the responsibility can be, from everything from having to streamline government to ensuring that our natural resources are well cared for in the state of Indiana and that our energy is both reliable and affordable for Hoosiers.
Mm.
All those things are an awesome responsibility, but we have a great team. And at the end of the day, it's just a job. And so, yes, I recognize the big responsibility, but I'm not overly impressed by the
Uh,
title. I'll tell you that.
well, I am. I am very impressed because honestly, I feel like we so often minimize what we do, and I think that's good though. I mean, that's humility. So I love knowing that you're definitely humble in your position. But I also think that it's important to realize that yes, it is just a job, and I love that you're saying that. As someone that is a Hoosier,
Mhm,
it's interesting to me that there's a position out there that I hadn't really understood,
mhm.
and not till I got more involved locally in my community government a little bit with an organization I'm a member of, that I really started to understand. We just know we go turn on our lights.
Yes,
We know we have heat. We
yes,
know we have these things. And like so many things that the Lord has provided for us, we just kind of take it for granted.
yes.
So, one of the things that I think is really amazing is when you look at the whole realm of responsibilities you have to
Mhm,
provide the energy and the resources, there's all these words that I'm now hearing, like nuclear
mhm.
is the big one.
Yeah,
There's controversy about
yes.
coal,
Mhm,
solar. Could you just take a few minutes and just break down, first of all, why should we not be afraid of the word nuclear?
mhm.
That
Sure.
kind of, I hear that and I think of So
Yes.
I'd love to understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question. And I'll back up just for a moment. Governor Braun's Freedom and Opportunity Agenda embraces an all of the above energy strategy here in the state of Indiana. And I'm so grateful for that because we have abundant resources here to generate electricity. And water is also in our purview as
Okay.
well. And water is an essential, of course, to life. And it's also something that we have in abundance here in Indiana. Our challenge on water is finding ways to get it to where it needs to go. We have plenty of water. So we're working on a statewide water plan. So I want to mention that.
Yeah.
But on the
That's
energy
great.
side, in embracing nuclear, it's really something that's had a bad perception for a long time. And yes, there have been some disasters,
Yeah.
globally recognized disasters. And when something goes wrong in nuclear, it's very newsworthy around the world and it's a massive cleanup to endure. But I think people don't realize that we've had nuclear power. The United States invented nuclear energy. It was on
Right.
the cusp of being deployed, but the United States brought it across the finish line. And we've been using it for over 60 years with our nuclear Navy. So basically, our submarines are small modular reactors that are on the back of these little submarines and have been used cleanly, safely, efficiently for over 60 years. And in fact, uh, because of the weapons tie-in, people have that fear.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if you look at the electricity side of it, it is among the safest form of electricity in the
Really?
world. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you look up the data, wind, solar, and nuclear are the safest forms of electricity. If you look at per kilowatt production by any death that could be associated with that form of electricity generation, it is even safer than hydroelectricity, which
Oh,
is shocking. And so that's part of the word that I want to get out because
yeah.
today's energy landscape has changed so drastically. It's a historic time in the United States and around the world. We haven't had this kind of electricity demand since after World War II. And it really reminds me, I had a friend who
Mm.
likened it to when the United States came together and built the Hoover Dam
Wow.
as a private and public venture that the whole country got behind and said, we're going to do this to build this kind of electricity. This is where we are with nuclear energy
Really?
today. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's intriguing. I mean, I'm sure the answer to this is obvious, but why?
Well, we had a need for big power then,
Mhm.
and it was an untapped resource. And we have a need for big power now, and it's an underutilized resource.
Wow.
We have the need for the equivalent of the same electricity that New York City uses every day, times 20 in the next year in this country.
That is unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. So if you want to put it
Wow.
into numbers for here in Indiana, I know you have a nationwide, probably
Yes.
global audience, but here in Indiana, as a state in the middle of the United States, we need about 22 gigawatts of electricity at our peak at any given time. The hottest day in the summer, coldest day in the winter, 22 gigawatts. We're going to have to increase that by at least 4% year over year, every year, which for the last 20 years, we haven't had any increase. We've been very stagnant across the whole country. And many areas of the country, and I don't want people to be fearful. I want to draw a realistic
Right.
picture, and that is that more than half of the country is at an increased risk for power outages right now. Because over the last 30 years or so, we've been closing coal plants very rapidly. There's also a very negative perception on building any gas lines. And so natural gas is also a challenge to build. And we've been replacing it with renewables, which I love
Yeah.
renewables. I mean, renewables are great. They do an amazing job, but it's the difference between having an automobile and a bike.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need a bike. You love a bike, but you
Yes.
can't really replace your automobile
Right.
with a bike
Right.
just because it's cleaner. There's no fuel cost
Right.
for a bike. We still need cars.
Right.
And then sometimes you need a tank.
Yes.
And nuclear energy is a tank. And that's what it's like to
Yeah.
build nuclear energy. It's a big challenge. It's a great resource, but it takes a commitment. It takes time and it takes money.
Well, I'm really fascinated because when just you talking about the need to have more energy produced and how we've kind of just fallen a little bit short or maybe a lot short getting
Yes.
that just achieved, it's sort of staggering that we've maybe left our eye off the ball a little bit in that area. And so now your position and your task, along with other people, I'm sure, in your position around the country, and certainly I would think globally, are
Mhm,
really like, we've got to focus on the plan, which it sounds like you are already doing from water, but
mhm.
just making it clear that nuclear is not something to be scared of.
Correct.
There's the controversy of natural gas and
Mhm,
for sure coal,
mhm,
which I mean, as someone that doesn't really know much about either,
mhm.
I will say that for me, I don't know what to think because I don't know. I mean, you have
Yeah.
visions in movies of coal miners, and then you hear about people that have, suffered illnesses for
Mhm.
this and that, but I also know there's people that have chosen to live in and work in that life. But then you have people that say you shouldn't be doing this and you should be doing that. So it's just a wonderful thing that I feel like you're educating us,
Thank you.
educating on us on what not to be afraid of,
Mhm.
and that we are going to have opportunities to have clean energy. And that's really important.
Well, just recently we saw the example in Portugal and Spain where there was a blackout for a significant amount of time. And a lot of the challenge that happened there was because they were overly reliant on renewables and it got kicked off by a transmission issue. So it was in the lines, the grid lines that originally started. But you really have to have always available, dispatchable, which means when I turn the dial up, we've got the electricity, energy, and at a high capacity. And so that means that, more than 50% of the time that resource is available. Unfortunately, a challenge with renewables is that usually those are only available way less than 20% of the time. If the wind's not blowing and the sun's not
Right.
shining, you have to have either nuclear, natural gas, or coal behind it. Or if you're blessed in an area that has hydropower, that's great. A new area of endeavor is geothermal. We're very open to that in Indiana. We have great opportunity for biofuels here in Indiana. So we truly embrace the all of the above. But going back to the coal issue,
Hmm.
the reality is burning coal first of all, we've made huge strides on our emissions in the United States. In Indiana alone, we've lowered our emissions in the last 20 years by more than 60%.
That's amazing. That's huge.
We have a better environmental track record for our lowering of emissions than California. So we've done a lot
That's
in that
amazing.
area.
Yeah.
And frankly, between the start of where the EPA started to really regulate coal to where we are now, there was a period of time where there was coal regulations that were so effective in cleaning up our water, our air, and our ground. Did a great, tremendous job there. But then we kind of went beyond where there became this rallying cry of the war on coal and closing coal plants. And we're going to
Right.
put a lot of coal miners out of jobs.
Yeah.
That was overkill
Right.
because we use coal more efficiently, more cleanly, more safely than anywhere in the world. And I can attest to that
Yeah.
firsthand. I worked for a company that developed coal and natural gas for 6 years here in Indiana.
Okay.
And my job was a really fun job. I did communications and government affairs. And so I used to take lawmakers and leaders from around the state into the underground coal mine.
Oh, how fabulous.
Yep. And it was an amazing learning
I
experience.
bet it was.
And you could see the safety measures that were in place and the challenges that the coal miners have to face every day, the culture of the coal miners. I mean, they love their jobs, they love what they're doing.
Mhm.
And even though we've lessened our reliance on coal, I don't believe we can walk away from coal completely, especially over the next 10 years. And so, what we're doing in Indiana is asking our coal generating plants to stay open. All of our coal plants are scheduled to close down in the next 10 to 15
Really?
years.
Okay.
So we're asking them, can you give us another maybe 5 to 10 years while we build more gas, while we build out nuclear, while we further develop geothermal, biofuels, whatever it is that's going to fill that gap? We have got to have that dispatchable, reliable electricity because we're putting ourselves in jeopardy. It may have seemed
Yeah.
like a good idea to close coal plants and replace it with renewable when we didn't have any demand increase. But now when we're looking at supplying 20 more New York cities across the country,
Well, that's not realistic.
it's just not
It's
realistic.
not realistic, and frankly, it sounds like if you need to not put the cart before the horse,
Correct.
because when you look at this change, and I mean, neither you or myself were involved in that change, but when
Right.
that change happened, sometimes you gotta look ahead
Hmm.
and walk it through.
Yep.
Okay, this will happen, then this will happen. And so
Hmm.
if you're not really thoughtful about that or thinking those things through, that's very impactful and not the best way.
It is, and I can tell you the industry, a lot of the industry could see that coming by the lessening of the ability to have that always on baseload electricity source.
Right.
But what nobody could see, to be really fair, nobody could see this surge in demand that we have in the United
Is that
States.
just because we're more populated, more cars? I mean, that, like I said, again, that might be just before when I said this is probably very obvious, but
No, it's a great question, but really what there's three categories. There's AI data centers is
mhm,
major. And so,
wow,
you know,
hadn't thought of that.
the United States being able to house and host artificial intelligence here on our land is crucial for us to be able to navigate the future and have access and control over those kinds of resources. So AI data centers are big users of water and electricity.
Okay, and I
So
had not thought
that's
about
one
that.
area,
Okay.
and I'll circle back to that a second. The reshoring, remanufacturing, bringing home all this industry so that we don't rely on other countries for our semiconductor chips and essential materials for all the things that we use in life is also increasing our electricity
Okay.
demand. And then just think about everything you plug in every day. All the technology that's in this room around us that we didn't really have access and use in the way that we do
Like when you and
today.
I grew up, probably in the 70s, we were just plugging in, a toaster.
Yes,
We
exactly.
plugging in a TV, and
Right.
now you're right. I mean, it's everything. I
Think
hadn't
about
yes.
how often you get into a place and the first thing you look for is a plug.
Yes.
So the electrification, the reshoring of manufacturing, and the data centers are really driving up our demand. And it sounds like it's a scary um, need on our electricity and water, but truly the way that we look at it in Indiana is this is a huge opportunity because our legislature and their wisdom put into law this year under Governor Braun's leadership a bill that says any large user of electricity that comes into the state and needs additional generation or transmission has to help pay for 80% of that development.
Oh,
And these good
good job.
partners in industry are happy to do that. And that way it lessens any kind of burden on Hoosiers on their electric bill. So the primary importance to our electric strategy for our governor is reliability and affordability. And having data centers and big manufacturers, steel manufacturers come into Indiana helps us to create jobs in some industries. Other industries like data centers, they don't create many jobs, but in some ways that's good because then you don't have to build a lot of roads, you don't have to
Right.
build a lot of schools, all that infrastructure that comes with a big job campus. But yet there's tax base, they contribute significantly to the tax base,
Absolutely.
and they're going to help us deploy nuclear energy and other next
They're
generation
offsetting
infrastructure.
yeah, they're offsetting some of the expense,
100%.
and that's the win.
Yeah.
Okay, so on all of this, when you look at where Indiana is
Mhm.
geographically, and then we do have listeners in California and Texas and
Mhm.
around the country,
Sure.
we have these water sources. We're not far from Lake Michigan,
Right.
for start.
Mhm.
Um, is this the water source when you talked earlier about we have the water?
Yes.
Where all is it, and without maybe getting into all the details,
Sure.
because we may not be able to understand it all, but where how do you get is it how do you transport it?
So, good question. Really, what you do is you create these regional hubs of water.
Okay.
And so, building a reservoir, and the ideal model is to have a reservoir that's built, and then right next to it, have a storage facility.
Okay.
And in Indiana, we kind of stumbled upon that because we had a really big reservoir in central Indiana, and there was a rock quarry right next to it. And when the
Uh-huh,
rock quarry
perfect.
was done, they created it to be a water storage, and it is now supplying most of the water to central Indiana. And we said, oh, that works. And so taking that model, we
Mhm,
are blessed to have a lot of lakes and rivers, and of
mhm,
course the Great Lakes in Lake Michigan right
mhm.
north of us.
That's true.
So it's those natural bodies of water. It
Mhm.
is creating holding places for our water collection, and then it's distributing it in smaller ways around the state. And so that's what we're working on right now.
I just love that, and I'm thinking about and I can't remember the scripture, but I feel like I wrote it down, and if I find it, oh, I did. I found it. It's Colossians 3:23-24. Whatever you do, work at it with your whole being for the Lord and not for men, because you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as your reward. It's Christ that you're serving. So when I think about what you're talking with the water, it just made me think of that.
Mhm.
Just and everything you've said so far. We have what we need.
Yes,
The Lord has provided
absolutely.
with the earth. I mean, coal is obviously, the elements,
Mhm,
the minerals, the water,
mhm.
the wind, the
Yes, the sun,
sun.
it's great,
I
yeah.
just love that.
Mhm,
And then we have our minds and the technology to do the other things that we're doing. But just listening to you even say you have the quarry, I mean,
mhm.
the rock formations. I mean,
Yeah,
we have all these things. So we're being, a really good steward of these things,
I love
which is
that
the
you
hope.
said that. I really hadn't connected those dots so specifically like that, but you're absolutely right. We have valuable, precious natural resources here, and being a good steward of it is really the goal.
It is the goal. Okay, so I love that I've gotten some education here. I'm a learner. I love to learn, so bring it on. That said, I want to go back a little bit.
Mhm.
You mentioned earlier in our conversation that you had not planned. This was not your plan. This was obviously the Lord's plan for you to be in this position.
Yes.
Where did you start? What was your plan when you went to college and graduated? Where were you seeing yourself?
Well, I expected to have a career in communications, advertising, that kind of I really liked market research and things like that. And so I did that for ad agencies for a long time, but it was really out of a time of struggle and challenge that kind of changed my whole trajectory in life. And that was, I had been working for the company that developed the coal mines
Okay.
and the gas. And there was definitely a war on coal at that time, and they were laying off coal miners week after week. And really, my job doing communications and government affairs and things like that was really an overhead kind of position. And they couldn't justify laying off all these
Right.
hardworking coal miners and keeping a job like a public relations type of job. And so I knew my job was in jeopardy. My husband's job, he had also been laid off from a higher education. And this was during the Obama administration, where there was really, in my opinion, a lot of federal regulatory overreach. So into his industry, into my industry. And we both felt it up close and personal. We
Mm.
both lost work because of it. And at that time, two of our four children were very ill. And over the course of 2 years, had had 6 surgeries.
Oh dear. That's very taxing.
Yeah, it was horrendous. I mean, and I prayed all the time,
I'm sure you
continuously,
did.
reached out to the Lord and had both the concern, the grave concern of what was going to happen to our family, but also a grace and comfort that we were going to come through it with the
Mhm.
help of Jesus. And so that is what I think carried our whole family through a very difficult time. And during that time, um, I had been very involved in politics, and someone asked me if I would consider running the Trump campaign in 2016 for the state of Indiana. And it was a hard question because I wasn't, I had worked for Carly Fiorina
Okay.
for president as a volunteer, and she was my candidate. And then she dropped out. And so I wasn't quite sure who I was going to support. But I prayed about it a lot, gave it serious consideration. And it really came to me that the three things that were most important were the economy, national security, and the Supreme Court, and the things that the Supreme Court upholds. And so I knew where Donald Trump stood on those things, and I thought, gee, he really, truly is the strongest. And this was early on in 2016, and so I started running the primary campaign, and I had a lot of friends saying, "What are you doing? This is going to follow your whole life. Don't do this." They weren't sure that he was quite a serious candidate at the
Yeah.
time. And I felt like I had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And so there were so many, I'll say, miraculous kinds of incidents that happened as I was running that campaign that made me realize that I was really on the right path. And
Isn't
then
that neat
it
when
was amazing.
you get the confirmation,
Yes,
when you take the step, the unpopular
it
step,
was very
the step
unpopular.
against what your friends and family
Hmm.
sometimes are saying, "Don't do this." I've
Yes,
experienced that myself in life,
yes.
where everyone around me is saying, "Do this,"
Hmm.
but in your spirit,
Yes.
this voice, the Lord is saying, "I want you to take that step." So by you taking
Yeah.
that step, It took you
It changed my whole
next.
life.
Yeah, it changed your whole
It
life.
really did. So after the Trump-Pence campaign, they won in November of 2016. I was asked to be a presidential appointee at the U.S. Department of Energy, and I ended up. I had always admired nuclear energy and hadn't worked there much. Hadn't been primarily involved there. So I worked in kind of an administrative capacity. I was chief of staff in the Office of Nuclear Energy.
Mhm.
And so you didn't have to be a nuclear engineer to do that job.
Praise the Lord,
Yes.
because that
But
would be a
it
heavy burden, I
turned
would
out
think.
great because my background was communications and my boss was Rick Perry. He was the Secretary of Energy.
And as a former Texan,
Yes,
I know. I
you know
was in
him.
Dallas 22 years, so
Yes, he's a
definitely.
star.
Yes.
He was an amazing leader, and I still look at him as a model of how to lead and how to be a human being and a boss at the same time.
Mm,
But he said, you know, Susie, nuclear has an image problem and we need to make nuclear cool again. So this is 2017. He said, can you help us make nuclear cool again? And I thought, that's why God has me here. Like
yeah.
I have a background in communications, so many engineers working in this field, and that's often not their strong suit. And so we did a lot of education and outreach about the true benefits, challenges, everything that has to do with nuclear. And
Mm,
you know, it was just an amazing thing, and it
love that.
helps me today that I know I have to make time and prioritize education and outreach on nuclear, but also on all our energy sources and about the reality of where we are as a country and our need to develop energy. And so
Absolutely. Well, and that's just that underscores really what you said earlier. And even where I asked earlier, it's just like we need to be educated because the word nuclear or the word coal, and a lot of times it's unfairly presented to us
yeah.
through narratives that aren't the whole story
Hmm.
or even the truth.
Hmm.
So, other than doing my podcast, for example, or a news spot, I mean, how do you do that? That seems like quite an undertaking
It is. It is.
to shift a
Hmm.
big word, a
Hmm.
couple of big words.
Yeah. Well, when I was at Department of Energy, we really focused on very key constituencies that we thought could influence the culture by spreading information, content. And so one of the things we did was reached out to young people and we created what we called a Millennial Nuclear Caucus.
I
And
love that
we went
idea.
all over the country and really all over the world holding events that were in fun, interesting places. Sometimes it was in a pub kind of atmosphere
Right.
after work and inviting people to come to a happy hour and have speakers on the topic. Sometimes it was at universities. Sometimes it was at corporate campuses. And we would have these events. We'd invite young people to come, make it a lot of fun, and then have the experts there to answer questions about nuclear waste, the safety case, what the technology is like, what the jobs are like, what the economic impact is for a state, those kinds of questions, and just start a conversation. And so we did that outreach with young people. We had a really robust social media campaign that was not just a bunch of facts and figures, but rather reaching out. I had an amazing team of communicators reaching out with things like messaging on social media, the 5 things the Simpsons got wrong about nuclear. You know, a lot of us have a perception about nuclear based on our experience with that cartoon.
Yeah.
And so it was relating to people in regular speak, in their own conversation, in relevant ways. And then we also had Atomic Wing Wednesdays on Capitol Hill. Once a month on a Wednesday, we'd have hot wings brought in to a meeting room on Capitol Hill. We'd invite lawmakers to come and their staff.
That is clever.
And again, we had real life people there having a conversation, answering
That's
questions.
so clever.
And so it was that kind of just
Yeah.
outreach. And so now we're trying to do that on the state level in Indiana. And so in July this year, we're having a nuclear energy forum hosted by the Indianapolis Business Journal, and that's July 22nd in Indianapolis. And it's really kind of an open house for all the local leaders from around the state to come and learn and ask their questions about the good, the bad, the ugly, about nuclear. And
We can
coming
just
to
have them listen
Indiana,
to this podcast. They would
there,
really
there you
they
go.
would learn a lot.
Yeah. So we're doing things like that. We're really trying to come meet people where they are and just have a frank conversation with facts.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was thinking you're meeting people where they are because that's you're if someone's afraid, if someone's got a misconception,
Yeah.
If they just have it wrong completely, more than the misconception, it's completely wrong. I mean,
Mhm.
all of those things, you're meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
So I really just love that.
Yeah, thank you. And I also, in preparing to come here, I looked on your website and
Okay.
saw about your favorite Bible verses,
Mhm.
and one of them being, and I'm not going to say it appropriately, but the idea that if your people will humble themselves and ask for forgiveness and change their ways,
Yes.
that God will have
Yes.
mercy on them.
Yes.
And so that has nothing to do with energy, but um, talking about meeting people where they are and having that conversation, you know, thinking about our culture in general, because it may be a conversation about energy, or it may be a conversation about DEI, or it
Yes.
may be a conversation about gender or something
Mhm.
like that. And being able to meet people where they are and
I
have
love that.
reality, and then think about, we I just really was touched by you having that on your
Oh,
website and
thank
thinking
you.
about, as a culture, for us to be able to come together, unify,
Yes.
and maybe even be open-minded enough to change our minds on different things and be respectful. It's just something we kind of need in our culture
I
today.
agree. And to your point, to piggyback, we're commanded to love our neighbor.
Hmm.
That's what we're commanded to do and love God.
Yep.
So everything we do, if we focus in whatever we're doing,
Hmm.
professionally, personally,
Hmm.
then we're going to be on the right side of things.
Absolutely.
And that's the
Amen.
goal. That's the
Yeah.
goal. Well, thank you so much for doing this podcast with me. I've just really thoroughly enjoyed this so very much. And I close each episode with a pearl of wisdom. And today I'm battling in my mind between a couple of scriptures. So I think I'm just going to share both that I just love. And I think they're just so relevant. One is Psalm 32:8. And I'm going to read it because I don't want to misspeak it. But Psalm 32:8 is one of my favorites. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. And the other one is so well known as well, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. And I just think these are just so perfect with the conversation I've had today with Susie because she trusted the Lord for his plans. And when everyone else around you is telling you to do something potentially different, if we go to the word, it does not come back void. It's still alive. And this is where we have the opportunity also to continue to pray and ask the Lord to instruct us, as his word says, and he will. So I leave you with that. And I thank you for joining us. And we'll see you next time on Pinpoint.